Where did you grow up?
In Overland, Missouri.
Overland, Missouri? What was it like?
Well, it was right after the Depression, but there was just small, two-bedroom houses, in fact, is what we lived in. But it was a little brick house. My mother and father got married and they moved into it right away.
Where were your mom and dad from?
My father was from Rhineland, Missouri, and my mother was from Morrison, Missouri.
Morrison, where's that at?
It's kind of near Gasconade and Herman and all.
Oh, it's up in there.
Area.
Oh, that's where we.
German, kind of the German.
The German descent.
Located.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Her name was Feelings, Fehlings. Feelings.
Let's see. What were they like?
My mother and father?
Yeah. What was your mom like?
Oh, they were very nice people.
Mm-hmm. Were they farmers? Living out that way?
No, my father was a carpenter. He hated farming. He got down there as soon as he could.
I see. So,
and my mother was a stay-at-home mother.
Stay-at-home. How many siblings did you have?
I had one sister and one brother. A sister a year older and a brother a year younger.
You're young. What were their names?
Lorraine, it was my sister, and my brother's was Melvin.
Melvin. And how long? So, did your mom and dad marry prior to coming to Florida or to the city, or?
Yeah.
Or did you live out that way for a while, or what?
No, they were married in Wellston, Missouri, in St. Barbara's Church. So, but they met in the country.
They did.
Yeah. My father's brother had a girlfriend, and that was my mother's girlfriend. So then they hooked up with each other.
Oh, okay. All right. What was your relationship with your parents? Was it good?
Oh, very good.
Very good?
Yeah. They were loving, and they, we were born right at the Depression in 30 and 31. And
yeah, what year were you born?
I was born in 31, and my sister was 30, and my brother was 32.
So that was just prior to the Depression then?
Yeah, well, the Depression was really, the crash was like...
Right, 29. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was in the heart of it. And my father always had a job, but, he was a carpenter. He worked at, like, Shapley Hardware, but he always had a job, but it was pitiful, and he had to take a big cut, so
for sure.
But the money was really a problem, like it was for everybody.
Did he build houses, or was he an inside carpenter, or what?
No, he was mostly inside carpenter. In his later years, he worked at McDonnell Douglas, and he was a carpenter there, a maintenance carpenter.
Really?
Yeah, and they used to build, like VIPs would come into town, and he'd have to build all these stands for them to sit in while they had a big thing, and then afterward they come turmoil back down.
Really?
And they always had to put a new wall up because they were trying to make a different office spacing, and then they put new walls up here and there, just any kind of maintenance.
Oh,
and he loved it. He was part of the team at McDonnell Douglas. He really loved it.
How long he worked there?
I think about 15 years.
Really?
And he retired from there.
No kidding. Well, isn't that cool? When did they die?
My father lived till he was 79, and he had a stroke, and he died like within 2 weeks. And then my mother didn't die till she was a few months before her 90th birthday. And she had had a bad stroke about 7 years before that, so she was in a nursing home those last years.
Oh, really?
She was pretty much, her whole left side was gone.
Oh, really?
And she was pretty heavy, so one person couldn't take care of her. She needed it,
She was heavy?
Yeah.
Well, you're not.
No, I walk all the time. My mother didn't walk. Well, she was active, but she ate a lot. She was a very good cook, and she loved her
German cook, huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, did she do anything else? She was strictly a stay-at-home mom?
For a short while during World War II, she worked at what's called Accu-Rule, where they made slide rules. That was predecessor to calculators or whatever. And they had, within micrometers, they had to do these things, or they threw them away. And they worked there during the war.
So she was Rosie the Riveter
kind of.
For that period of time. Yeah,
My father worked there.
Really?
Yeah.
So he didn't serve in the military?
No, he was too young for World War one, and he too old for World War
Oh,
I.
I see. I see. Did
Yeah.
did any of your brothers serve
My brother was in the Navy during the Korean War.
during the Korean War?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. What's your best memory of childhood that you can think of off the top of your head?
Oh, I guess Christmases.
Christmas?
Yeah.
Mhm. Was that a big thing at your house?
Yeah. And we
Mhm.
believed in Santa Claus, and my father used to make these elaborate train set with the trains that go around.
Really?
But he'd make mountains he'd starch some material real stiff, and he'd put it over newspapers, and he'd make mountains and lakes and tunnels and everything. And then when it dried, he'd paint it and put glitter and little trees and everything. And when we got up on Christmas, we got our presents on Christmas Eve. We'd go in there, and the train would be going around and in the tunnels, and it was just the most.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was the most.
Was that one of his big hobbies?
Yeah, he did a lot of carpentry around the house and made
Yeah.
furniture.
Well, I mean the trains. Was he a train guy?
Oh yeah.
Was he?
Yeah.
Well, who, let's see.
Grandma volunteered for the Democrats. She was.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Tell me about that.
very big in democratic policies.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was golden-haired representative, and where they sent her to Washington and Jeff City, and my father too, very, very active in the.
Now I heard you had a big,
Like a barbecue.
big barbecue.
Yeah,
Backyard.
and Symington was there.
Symington,
all the time.
yes, I remember.
Older Symington was there, and all these other big politicians.
Yeah. The big. Did she do that every year?
Oh yeah,
Really?
yeah,
I'll be darned.
she loved it.
Well, that's cool.
And she sewed a lot, and she made our clothes and everything. She was the best sewer and cooker
And Ted.
yeah, she just did all kinds of crafts and things.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's neat. Did she ever think about running for office?
I don't think so.
Never occurred to her.
No, no, not like political, no.
Yeah, but she was a big
But she was
Democrat.
a big supporter, and politicians loved her because, she'd get crowds together and whatever.
She helped raising money.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. Wow, that's cool. And that was in your backyard.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
And it was
That'd be
my
neat.
mother's backyard.
So where'd you go to school?
I went for 8 years to Our Lady of Presentation parochial school.
Parochial school.
Yeah, and then I went 4 years to public high school.
So you had the nuns, the old nuns, the ones
We
with the
had
habits.
nuns for grade
Mhm.
school. I think we had a lay teacher like for 4th grade. It was the pastor's niece, I think.
Well, were the nuns as mean as I've heard?
Well, we were pretty scared of them.
The penguins?
Yeah. We never crossed them, I tell you.
You didn't cross them at all. Well, that's probably a good idea from what I've heard. What kind of student were you?
I was a good student, but I wasn't as smart as my sister. I didn't make as good a grades as she did. But I was very good.
What kind of activities did you play sports or anything?
No, but I played the accordion.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, when World War II ended, I played the accordion up in Rhineland at a rally for the returning soldiers.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then when I went to high school, I played the violin and the orchestra and the clarinet and the marching band.
Oh, that's cool.
I wasn't very good.
Oh, well, the marching band, you just got to be able to walk in a straight line.
Yeah, right.
What'd you do for fun when you were a kid in
Oh.
school?
I always played with my brother. I was kind of a tomboy, and we just
Oh, really?
play outdoor kind of games and building forts and just things like that. Where my sister, she was cleaning house and making doll clothes and stuff.
Oh, gosh. So she was prissy.
Yeah, she was prissy.
Oh.
She was badly burned when she was 9 years old.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember my mother had gone to the grocery store. I came into the house, and she was coming up the basement steps, and she was beet red. Her hair was all burned off, and I knew she was burned. I don't know how I knew that, but I just screamed and ran out of the house and ran to the lady next door, and I said, "My sister's burned," and so she came over there and she called the doctor. They didn't have 911, but she called the doctor. And he got there before my mother got home from the store, and by that time she was laying on the couch wrapped in a sheet and had been sedated. And he said, you know, she needed to go to the hospital. And she was there like 3 months.
Oh my.
Skin grafts and.
How'd that happen?
Prissy, Lorraine, she was cleaning down in the basement, and she'd gotten some stuff together, and she threw it into this furnace, which had a stoker, and just then the stoker turned on and blew out and caught her dress on fire.
Oh my.
And she ran up the steps to go, you know, gonna run outside, you know, I guess that's what you'd think. And she couldn't get the door open, so she ran back down and turned the hose on herself.
Wow.
And then I came in and saw her.
Oh my.
And my brother and I, we envied her because she got all this candy and gifts and everything, and we couldn't even go see her, and she wouldn't share it with us.
That's
But
why
we
my
hid
mom
the-
doesn't like cocoa butter.
Yeah,
Really?
we hid in the closet when the doctor came every week to change her dressings, or every other day, whatever it was, because she'd scream and cry and whatever. And my brother and I'd hide in the closet because it scared us.
Oh my.
It was pretty bad.
Traumatic.
Yeah.
She's still.
Yeah, and fortunately, all her burns were on parts of her body that didn't show unless she went swimming.
Right.
And so she, you know, she was still the golden girl and smart, and, and she played the piano beautifully. She was really talented and smart.
I'll be darned. Well, that's good. Well, her hair burned though.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. She didn't
Yeah.
get.
Not for bad.
And later she had skin grafts because of the scar tissue under her arms and places, and they took skin off of her legs and put it on there, and.
Oh my.
And giving a talk on the radio club. He was in a radio club.
Oh, really?
And at a big assembly, and I thought, oh gosh. And I was uglier than sin. I had braces. But I still thought he looked like Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley.
That was
Okay.
before Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
But yes, and then eventually, but I mean, we didn't start going together because. Well,
So was he older or younger than you?
Oh, he's a year older.
A year older. Okay. So
Can you tell?
Okay.
Look at that gray beard. But he always says he was trying to date my sister.
Oh,
and,
I see.
But she was going steady with his best friend. So I said, you've never had a
Oh.
date with her. But then when he couldn't get her, he said he settled for me. I said, he got the best thing that ever happened to him.
That's right. He didn't know how lucky he was. Well, you guys, did you start dating in high school then?
In high school.
In high
yeah.
school.
I
And
was 16 when I got my first kiss.
16.
And I never well, I did date a couple when we broke up for a little while, but basically he was it.
So that was
Yeah,
your one.
once I got my hands at closet, he didn't get away.
Oh,
And
so
I made him pay for it.
So you knew he was the one then,
Yeah.
right away?
Right.
Oh, that's good. How did he propose to you?
I think it just came. I don't know. It just came. You know.
Yeah,
It just kind of assumed it.
just assumed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there was no big
Well,
down on your
actually,
knee.
when I started nursing school, we were broken up at that time, and you could not get married in nursing school, or you were kicked out. So that was
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know how many times he said, "Quit school, we'll get married. Quit school." I said, "No way! I've put up with too much to throw that all away." So we got engaged like when I was a freshman, probably the first year. So we were engaged for like 2.5 years before we ever got married.
What year did you get married?
In 52.
1952.
And a few weeks before we got married, he got drafted.
Oh.
So we couldn't get married then because he's just got, we thought, well, when he gets out of his basic training before he gets shipped wherever, we'd set the wedding date. And so we were going to get married November 15th in 52. Well, he did get finished with his basic training, but his orders didn't read that he could leave until the Monday after our wedding. So it was too late to cancel the wedding and call everybody off, whatever. So my mother called to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and cried to the chaplain, whatever, and he finally got him off for the wedding.
Really?
So we got married one day. The next day, he went back to finish those 2 days at Fort Belvoir. Then he came back and we had a 12-day honeymoon.
12-day honeymoon. Where'd you
Before
go?
he left for Korea. We went to Chicago for a honeymoon.
Chicago for 12 days.
And obviously, I got pregnant in those 12 days.
That was going to be my next question.
So the first 9 months I was pregnant, and the next 9 months he was still over there. So when he came home, our son was 9 months old.
Wow.
First saw him.
First saw him.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard stories of that. I never, didn't know that happened to you though.
Yeah, it did. So I would never get married again. It was the most miserable experience in my life. All the tension, and it was awful. And it was,
Did you have a big wedding?
yeah,
You
the
did?
whole,
Full
long-
Catholic wedding?
Yeah, oh yeah, and the white dress and bridesmaids and, church. We had the reception in a hall, like if nothing else could go wrong, the father had rented a VFW hall, and like about a week or two before the wedding, they said we couldn't have it because they were having their some kind of celebration of that, whatever. And my father said, I paid the money and we were going to be there. You are not going to, and
Really?
they did. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they did with their whatever, but he said, I paid it and I got a contract and we're going there.
Well, good for him.
Yeah. So
Good for how many people were there?
Oh, I guess a couple hundred maybe.
Really?
Yeah. It was pretty crowded.
And so he left the next day.
Well, no, we had 12-day honeymoon. Well,
but-
he had to leave to go back to finish up
Exactly.
his 2 days at Fort Belvoir, and then we had our 12-day honeymoon.
I see. I see.
And
then
when
he
we
left.
come back, we were in Chicago, and then we came back, and we stayed at a hotel where you rented rooms by the week or something, because we didn't want to be living with my parents,
Right.
newlyweds. So we just lived there until he left.
And he went to, it was Korean War, correct?
Korean War.
Mm-hmm. All right. Raising children.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How many hours is this going to be?
Well, your first child was
Johnny.
John.
Johnny.
Mhm.
He was 9 months old when John got home. It's funny, he come home like 3 in the morning. I went out to the airport to pick him up, and we came back home to my parents' house, is where I lived while he was gone. And we went into Johnny's room, and the minute we went in, he got up, stand on the side of the bed, and he went to John, and John picked him up, and they were like best friends. And he was at an age when he didn't go to strangers, but he did. He picked him up, and he just,
Oh, that's
I guess maybe
interesting.
because it was the middle of the night or whatever, and he was so glad to have a break or something. He said, "This guy looks good to me."
So then you were pregnant again,
Yeah,
obviously.
well, that's how we spaced our children. Yeah, Michael came along about 13 months after John was home, the May of the following year.
May of the following year.
Yeah,
And then, well, you can go ahead and name all of them.
yeah, that was Michael.
Mhm.
And then we lived in a flat on Clara, and it was just a 1-bedroom flat. So we had the 2 kids and expecting the 3rd one, so obviously we needed a house. So we bought a house in Berkeley, put $10 down.
$10.
Yeah, well, we looked at it on a Sunday, and that's all we had, and we borrowed that from my mother. In fact, it's a $10, and they just wanted something to make sure we were serious.
Mhm.
Oh, you put $10 down, you're serious. So anyway, we bought that. It was a 3-bedroom house, and we moved in there and lived there for about 7 years, I guess, until we had 7. By then, we had 7 kids. And it's only 3 bedrooms, so we had the 2 boys and 3 boys, 2 in the bunk bed and 1 had a trundle underneath it. So the 3 boys were in 1 bedroom. We had Barbara and Carolyn and Teresa were in the 2nd bedroom, and the baby Mary was in it sharing our bedroom.
Oh my.
So we had to get out of there then.
All right. Yeah.
And we bought a house in Wedgwood. And it had 4 bedrooms, and we immediately made a 5th bedroom out of the dining room. So then we had enough until Janet and Laura came along, but that was 7 years later.
7 years later, you had twins.
He had twins, yeah.
Oh my.
And in between there, we did have a baby, Danny, who was a crib death, SIDS, sudden infant death.
That was.
It was between Barbara and Carol.
Between Barbara and Carol. Yeah.
He was 3 months old.
Let's see. You were a nurse, correct?
Yeah.
So that was what you did for a living.
Yeah, I worked I always worked part-time, mostly because of work and school and babysitting.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing you pulled
Yeah.
that off.
Yeah, well, I worked weekends, and being a nurse, I could work nights. And he would babysit then. Like Saturday, I needed to sleep because I worked Friday night, and then Sunday I didn't really need to sleep because I didn't have to go to work the next night. But he was there, and I tried to get some sleep anyway. And he babysat, and he knew how to make chili and sloppy joes. So he cooked supper on Saturday night.
So you knew what you were having on,
Yeah.
on those
It
nights.
could have been cardboard, and if I didn't have to cook it, it was good.
That was fine, huh?
Yeah.
Now, where did you work? What was the name of the hospital?
DePaul.
DePaul.
I
So you
worked
did
there
work
for
at DePaul.
14 years, and then I went to Missouri Baptist Hospital and worked there for another 33.
Another 33. In the meantime, though, you went back to school, right?
I went back to school and I got my bachelor's degree from Webster University in 1979.
1979. Wow. Yeah, with that many kids there. Don't say you did that. Really.
And then we did have a short life in Ansonia, Connecticut, because the government sent us up there so he could go to Yale and get his master's degree. Well, they sent him up there to study astronomy. And so the whole family moved up there, and we all lived there. In fact, Teresa was born in Ansonia, Connecticut.
Really? How long were you up there?
Just a year.
A year.
Yeah.
Just enough for 1 year of schooling?
Yeah, and we rented out our house that we lived in while we were up there.
Down here? Did you really?
Yeah, and we rented a house up there.
Wow.
And we were lucky to find a tenant that they knew that they only had it for a year because we'd be back. And so.
You drove up there?
Yeah, we drove up there.
You drove up
But when we came back, we flew. Now, did we fly back? We flew back because Teresa was a baby, but he drove back with the car.
Oh, I see.
And
Did the kids, did we
What
all
was that
fly?
like?
Did the kids all fly or did we go with Dad?
No, they went. You all went with me on the plane.
Okay.
But Johnny, just as we were getting ready to leave Connecticut, he had the mumps and his face was so bad. And when we got off the airplane, my mother says, "Boy, Johnny's put on weight." I said, "Shh, he's got the mumps," because we didn't dare. They wouldn't let you fly if you had a contagious child. If you said.
Oh, my God.
And they didn't know he didn't have fat cheeks.
Yeah. What'd you want to be when you grew up? Did you always want to be a
I
nurse?
always wanted to be a nurse.
Really?
I always told my mother and father, I want to be a nurse and marry a doctor.
And
Well, I became
you got
a
half of
nurse,
it, right?
and he almost got a PhD.
It's pretty close.
So that's why we're donating our bodies to St. Louis University, because I always wanted to go to St. Louis U.
Really? So you're donating your body to the science department?
Yeah, we filled out all the papers, so whenever we die, we're going to St. Louis U.
Well, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not everybody does that.
And the kids don't seem to have a problem with it. If they were strongly against it, we wouldn't have done it, but they don't seem to have a problem with it. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's
it's
just an honorable thing to do. It really is. What's your ethnic background?
I'm Caucasian.
I may go back a little further than that.
Yeah, but I
mean,
always said I'm 100% German.
You're 100% German.
Yeah, I have no mixed blood like Don is half Polish.
Really?
I mean, all my ancestors were German, on my mother's and father's side.
So do you know when did they come over?
None of my
Turn of the
immediate
century?
ones came over. It'd have to be more than great grandparents because they all were born here in the United States.
Really?
But somewhere they came from Germany. Somewhere, not thousands of years ago.
Let's see. Here's a good one. What traditions have you passed down to your family? And I know one for sure.
What
The opening the presents at Christmas.
Yeah, we always opened our presents on Christmas Eve. Yeah, it's not Christmas morning, I don't know. And then we'd go to midnight mass on Christmas Eve after we opened our presents.
Mm-hmm. So you and John are Catholic.
Yeah.
You go regularly.
Yeah, we go all the time. And of all our kids, only one of them is still Catholic, and that's Janet and Jeff.
Oh yeah, that's
they're
right.
Catholic. The rest are all, they don't go.
So you didn't serve in the military obviously, but
No.
did you do anything during the Korean War? Did you
No, I
just
was
took care of
pregnant.
kids, right? You were busy having
I was
children.
always pregnant. 81 months I was pregnant in my life.
81 months. Let's see.
That's what I did all my life.
What was one of the happiest moments in your life that you can think of?
Gee. Maybe when I had the twins.
When you had the twins? Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to tell you that.
That's
The second was probably when I had Barbara.
Yeah, there you go.
Because see, Danny died, and I thought nothing's going to get rid of that missing that baby and she was born 8.5 months after Danny died, and I was not pregnant when he died, so she was early.
Really?
So in 1958, I had 2 children. Danny was in January and she was in December, Barbara.
Wow.
Irish twins.
Irish twins. That was the term I
Yeah.
was thinking of. Yeah.
I had 2 sets of twins.
Yeah, so I'm actually twin.
Yeah. Well, so you went 7 years with no children, and then you had
Yeah, we
twins.
thought we were through it.
So I'm sure that changed things drastically.
I said, well, my life is over. This is what it's going to be. We're not going to have these years like my parents did, where they were just by themselves and enjoyed their life, without kids.
Mm-hmm.
So that's never going to happen to us.
So, I mean, that was not a planned pregnancy, obviously.
No.
What did you think when the doctor said you were going to have twins, or did you find out
I
until?
did not know for sure until about 4 days before they were born, because they could never hear 2 heart tones, and they didn't do sonograms in those days.
Right.
But I was sure big.
Yeah. And it was our fault.
Miserable.
It was
It
your
was
fault.
our fault that she got pregnant because we sent them on a second honeymoon to take
Yeah,
Oh,
care of
that's
first
right.
time in our
Yeah.
married life, we were married 19 years, and it was the first time we ever went alone away together. I mean, I would be alone in the hospital having babies, or he might go on a business trip, or we might have gone with the kids, but we never ever got to go away alone together.
Well, we probably shouldn't have done that.
Don't tell
Is that
Jen,
right?
Laura.
Because 9 months later we had the twins.
Now, your children, John lives where?
John, my son,
Mm-hmm.
John.
Yeah,
he
go
lived
through the
in-
list. Tell me where everybody.
He lived in Illinois after he left home.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed at home while John went up to MIT. So I kind of had a man around the house
Right.
while he was gone, and then he moved went over to Illinois and had a house there, and that's where he's lived. And he got married and adopted the son of the woman he married,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all the kids they had.
And then
And he
Mike.
still lives out there.
And Mike lives.
And Michael, he moved out kind of early, and he lived in some apartments that he helped maintain and manage. a small group of, they weren't apartments, they were like little houses, or it was pretty crummy place. But after he quit that, then he went into plumbing, and he married his first wife. She was only 18 and he was 19. And so they got married young.
Who was the one that said, why would I have Mom come over and do my laundry over there?
Oh, that was Paul.
That was Paul. Tell that story, that was good.
Yeah, so that's Michael, and then he had a couple more marriages, and he had a total of 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one was Carol, and she had 3 boys, and she lived in Florissant.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's remarried and has 3 stepchildren.
All right.
And then the next one was Barbara, and man, has she been married.
And lived everywhere.
And she had a total of 3 girls altogether: Shelley and Cindy and Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara's lived here, and she's lived in Wisconsin, and she's still living in Missouri.
And then
the next one was Paul.
Paul. Mm-hmm.
And he was born in July, so he was about 1.5 years younger than Barbara. And he never got married. He worked for a company called R.L. Pullman in the Chesterfield Valley area. He worked there for 27 years. And he was a kind of a computer, and I don't know, and he did design. He designed small parts. They made like tools and parts. R.L. Pullman did, but he was in the office kind of work. And he worked there till he died. And he never got married.
Mm-hmm.
But he bought actually Michael built him a home in Troy, Missouri. They had one of those where you buy the foundations there, and then they buy and they get somebody to put the upside, and then he finished all the windows, and Michael did, and fireplaces, and so he had a home out in Troy, and he lived there till he died.
And then, tell me the story about the
laundry.
About the laundry.
Oh yeah, he lived at home until he was about 25 years old. And I told him, Paul, you gotta get out of here. Dad's gonna treat you like you're 16 until you move away. Because he did, and he acted like he was 16 a lot of time. And so finally he moved out when he was 25, and he moved out to Troy, and absolutely loved his house out there and his land. He had 5 acres, and he just absolutely loved it. And he had all kinds of neighbors because there was a mobile home near there, and he had good friends or whatever. And at any rate, after he moved out there, it seemed like every other day he was coming in. I said, "What are you doing here? I thought you moved." And he said, "Well, I just brought my laundry, whatever." And then Michael, the second oldest son, he said, "Paul, don't they have laundromats out in Troy?" And he said, "Well, that'd be stupid for Mom to come all the way out to Troy to do my laundry." But when we found out he was dead because his work called, and he hadn't been there one day, and they couldn't get a hold of him. And when the second day he didn't come in, they knew something was wrong. So they called us, and we immediately drove out there. And we couldn't get into the house because it was locked, but his car was there, so we knew something bad had happened. And when we got, we had the police come, and we broke in the door, and they found him, and he was in the bathtub, and he had drowned. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that until the autopsy showed that the cause of death was drowning. But he did have a seizure disorder, and he was taking Dilantin and Phenobarb for that, and it was pretty well under control. But he didn't take showers. He took a bath, and he probably, if he took showers, he'd still be alive. But he took a bath, and when he had a seizure, he drowned in the tub. And the cause of death was drowning.
Drowning.
So it was kind of tragic.
Sure is.
It was awful.
Yeah. Well, and then what, Mary?
Then the next one was Mary. No,
Teresa, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Teresa. She's the one that was born when we went to Yale in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And she is married and has one little girl, and she lives in Leesburg, Virginia now. And she's doing very well, and we see her maybe twice a year. We go there or she comes here. And so she's just doing fine. And then after her was Mary. And Mary, she worked at R.L. Pullman for a little while too. And Paul had gotten her job there because she was going to school at Flow Valley and working at Red Lobster. And she wanted to quit Red Lobster. So Paul asked her if she knew COBOL or something, and she said, "That's my forte." And so he got her a job there, and she worked there for a while in the computer thing. And then she got a better job, and she went on and on up after that. And Mary was married to her first husband, and they had two little girls, Sarah and Jamie. And then they got divorced, and then she got another husband who had two kids of his own that were adopted kids. They were from Honduras or Guatemala, I'm not sure which.
Really?
And then they got divorced, and so now she's just living with her two girls, and she's doing fine.
So then 7 years later.
And then 7 years later came Janet and Laura. And we used to call Mary and Janet Laura, we used to call them the triplets, because every time Janet and Laura got something, Mary would be, "I didn't get anything." She was so jealous of Janet and Laura.
She didn't know how to butter her own toast.
Yeah.
I remember that story, yeah.
Everybody had to butter her toast and cut her potatoes and whatever. But she turned out to be pretty darn smart, and she did good. And then after, Janet and Laura, they were just the best kids that ever worked. I never had trouble from Janet and Laura. They were always smart, and they did well in school. They never drank or did things other kids did. They got jobs. They were good in school, made excellent grades, and they were just perfect.
Well, they'll be glad to hear that.
I mean, they still get in fights, and
Sure.
I always said they were best friends and worst enemies. And they hated dressing alike, especially Laura. And sometimes Janet put something on. She said, "What are you wearing that for?" "I was going to wear that." And she had to say, "Well, wear it. I don't care." So they hated dressing alike. So what happens? They went to parochial school where they all wore uniforms. They thought the whole school was full of twins. And so then that wasn't enough. Then when they finished there, they got at the McClure High School, and they were on pom-poms. So they had to wear their uniforms like 3 days a week because there was always some pom-pom thing. And then they both worked at McDonald's.
Oh, my.
And then they spent a little time at Pasta House. And then they went into nursing school. And they worked the student uniforms and whatever. So they were doomed to dress alike.
I don't see any way around that.
But it's funny how often sometimes they'll go and buy something or come, somewhere and they've got the same thing on, or they bought the same thing. They've even sent each other the same birthday cards.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's really uncanny. When they were 8 years old, they won the title of the most alike twins at Mother of Twins Club.
Really?
They were so, and just to show you how, I mean, I don't think they're that identical. You can tell them apart, can't you?
I can now.
But Michael, at this wedding thing last week, he was there and he was yelling at Janet. He said, "Where were you Thanksgiving? We were looking for you." I said, "Michael, you don't even know? You're their brother." I said, "She was there. That's the one that wasn't there."
Well, remember when they were like real little toddlers?
Oh, when they were,
and
they were about 3 years.
Yeah,
they were 3 years old, and Janet was running with a Pringles can, those, they're soft, but anyway, she broke her tooth off. So there's a tooth's gone. So we put him in a daycare at 3, because all they did was, they didn't talk, because they didn't have to talk. You know, they want something and somebody'd hand it to them. So we put him in this daycare school, and they said, well, good, we'll be able to tell them apart because the one's got the tooth missing. It wasn't 2 weeks later that they went and had oral surgery because Laura's tooth was abscessed and they had to pull it. The same tooth. And Janet, her tooth had been broke out, but there was still a piece in there, so they had to get that out. So they both had oral surgery on the same day.
You're kidding me.
And when we went to school, the same tooth.
Seriously?
Seriously,
yeah. And none of my other kids ever lost a tooth prematurely.
That's uncanny.
That is uncanny. It's really
Wow.
And they did have their own little language.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sure
they
they
could
did.
understand each other with their The rest of us couldn't understand it, but they could understand each other. And they'd go,
So they learned to talk. And they haven't shut up.
No, they haven't. I will give you that.
To this day.
To this day, I have to admit. Well, tell me a little bit. I remember you telling me a story about working in an asylum. Is that right?
Oh, when I was in nursing school,
Yes,
we
exactly.
worked at St. Vincent's as part of our psychiatric field. And we'd spend 3 months living out there at St. Vincent's. And it was on a little cottage or thing, not actually in the hospital, which looks like an old-fashioned castle with turrets and everything. It's creepy, and it was creepy. And we lived there for 3 months, and it was off of St. Charles Rock Road. So we dated, and he didn't have, well, he usually had a car, I think, when we were there, when I was out there, but he'd come and visit me, and or take a streetcar.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me a little bit about that working there. I remember you telling some stories.
Oh, it was like Snake Pit, or, you know, like you see these horror movies, not like today's psychiatry where they medically, and, you know, tie them down with medicine, you know, or they don't even have inpatient hardly anymore. They still do electric shock treatments today, but it's nothing like the ones that they did when we were there.
This is pretty barbaric.
Oh, you'd wheel the patient in, and you had 3 people on each side of the patient, and the doctor at the head had to put the electrodes on there where you start the seizure, and so each person had to hold a limb, and that was your problem to take care of that limb, so that they didn't hurt themselves or anyone else, you know, because they would flop around. And you just wait until they put that on it, and, you know, and they had actually a big grand mal seizure. And if you ever see somebody with a grand mal seizure, it's disturbing. And they still did insulin therapy too, where they put them in an insulin shock.
Really?
Never do that anymore. And when you worked in that room, it would be a real dark, cold place, and you just had to keep taking vital signs. And it was kind of creepy, but they had some people that were, you know, typical, you know, they were crazy. They were really disturbed. They were like animals, some of them.
But that was hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
And you lived on the facility,
Yeah,
in the facility.
we lived at the facility. In fact, I had 2 roommates when we moved out there. We shared 3 a bed. 3 of us were in one room at the hospital when we were in nursing school. And when we went out there, one of our roommates, she got really, really bad, and they had to take her to the hospital and bid her. And she never, ever came back to nursing school.
Really?
She was in treatment, she was in a facility for all the rest of the years we knew her.
Wow.
So I can't blame St. Vincent's for that, but it certainly maybe brought
Didn't
it all
help.
out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because it was bad.
Well, what was your? Did you ever work in ER, or were you? What kind of a nurse were you? I mean, did you work in?
You mean after I got it?
After you got right.
Well, after I worked in OB and I worked in orthopedics for a little while, then the night supervisor who worked the 2 nights when the regular one had her 2 nights off, she quit. So I was 23 then, and said, the nun called me, she said, "Are you coming back to work soon?" This was after Carolyn was born. I said, "Well, yes." She said, "Well, we need you to relieve the house supervisor." I said, "Oh, I don't think I know." "Oh, don't worry about the nurse we got doing it now. She graduated the year behind you, and she's just doing fine, but she's quitting." So I got one night of orientation, and then from then on, I was the night relief supervisor. You learned as you went.
Wow.
But you just were directed traffic and everything, you know, when the night shift. And it was the pharmacy at night, because they didn't have a pharmacy, so I'd have to get, you know, non-narcotic kind of medications and things like that. And you just took care of emergencies, codes. They didn't do codes too much in my early nursing. It wasn't, they didn't, you know, when you'd go in and find a dead person, you'd go and cover them up. Oh. And I'll never forget one night.
Is that a medical term?
One day, somebody coded, in essence, they coded, and this nun was pushing and blowing, and I thought, my goodness. And then, of course, now it's so common, you know.
Sure.
Code. And then, of course, when at Missouri Baptist, I was one of the things as night supervisors, or you do direct codes. Mostly the traffic, make sure that the family's called, all the doctors are notified, and the priest if they're Catholic or anything. You just do the traffic. You try not to get tied into doing the drugs or the other stuff, because you need to be free to, you know, run and get rooms and things like that. So, but you are on the code team, and otherwise you get patients, you have to move them to intensive care or move them out, or anything that happens. 211 is an emergency, you go to that. 555 is when a full code, and so you have to do all of those things, and you have to help out wherever things are, you know, like I helped out in emergency room a lot.
That's why I was wondering if you worked in ER.
And a lot of time I transport the patients to the floor, and especially if they're on a monitor, then they have to be transported with somebody that can do the monitor. So I'd have to take them to their floors, you know, intensive care if they're on the monitor. But a lot of times I like to transport patients from the ER to their rooms, just as kind of a PR thing, and you know, make sure. And of course, when the supervisor comes off the elevator with a patient, you don't have to call and wait. Hey, we got, you know, they're there.
Right.
You know, so it's kind of a PR thing to do that.
Any stories that stick out?
Well, just one really funny thing one time. There were two supervisors on some nights. We had a patient come into ER, and he died, and you know, we coded him and everything, and we had the curtains all drawn, you know, and we were trying to get him straightened up so the family could come in, you know, one last time. And so we were trying to get his teeth in, because they'd taken him out during the code. And we couldn't we finally got him in, but it looked like he was grinning. And so the two of us were behind the curtain, and we were just hysterical. And you know how it is when your mother says, "If you don't quit laughing, I'm going to smack you." And you can't do this, and the family's right outside, whatever. So we were like, "Who put this?" It says somebody, looks like he had a pleasant death.
Died laughing, huh?
So I said, "Oh, that was one of those horrible things. It's awful when you don't want to laugh, and you can't stop."
Yeah. Well, when you retired, were you looking forward to it? Or you miss it?
Well, no. I always thought I loved my job, and I did. But once I retired, I thought maybe I didn't like it so much, because I love this. There's so much pressure because you always had goals, and you had a fire and hire and you know, intervention, and always, you know, you always had meetings and committees and stuff. And all of that, if you could just go and do your 8 hours and go home, you know, but no, they didn't stop it, you know.
And politics
so
too, I'm sure.
That was kind of, so, but then even after I retired at 65, I stayed on in the float pool another 3 years. And I would work when one of the night supervisors wanted off or something.
Really?
But I couldn't work more than 39 hours a month, or would interfere with my Social Security and my retirement. So I was limited to the hours, which was just fine, you know.
Yeah.
And I could get all the hours, you know, that wanted, because somebody was, oh, you know, I need her for working on this day or that day. They all wanted.
Well, that was nice to be needed.
Yeah. So, but then, and that was really no burden then, because I didn't have to do all that other meetings and stuff. I just did my 8 hours and left.
Mm-hmm.
Or 12.
Did you, when you retired, what year did you retire?
I retired when I was 68, so that would be, I'm 77, that 9 years ago.
9 years ago. So when you came home, were you bored? Or when you stayed home?
No.
You weren't? Well, walk me through a typical day. Yeah.
It seems like we're always busy.
Mm-hmm.
We got a calendar now because we got a lot of doctor appointments and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like we always, I walk 5 miles a day.
Right.
And that takes 2 hours, so I really walk more than 5 miles. But I walk, and then, you know,
And you acquire, you find money when you walk, correct?
Yeah, I find a lot of money.
And how much have you found over the years?
Whenever I come home with money, I have to clean it up, because sometimes it's really dirty and whatever, so I got steel wool and I clean it up and I throw it in a little thing. And then I change it into dollars or whatever, and as soon as I get $50, I buy a savings bond. And I got 18 bonds.
18.
$100 bonds. Now that's the purchase price. They were purchased, but some of them are like 8 years old. So they're worth more than that, but more than the 50 I paid.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as it gets up to 50, I buy a bond.
That's amazing.
And the only reason I do that is to keep track. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not that bonds is a terrible way to save money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know about it anymore. That's probably not.
Yeah, right now it's probably okay.
And somehow you got started in the walking.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I started walking in '89 because the hospital had a thing where we walked across the United States in 80 days, and we had teams of, I think there were either 10 or 20 on a team. And you walked every day, and you turned in your miles at the end of a week. And so we were the first team that got up to however many miles, 3,000 miles, whatever it is, 80 days. And we won T-shirts.
Oh.
That said,
Yes.
I walked across the United States in 80 days.
So you walk, what, 5 miles a day, you said?
At least I walk, it takes about an hour and 15 minutes to walk 5 miles, and I walk usually an hour and a half. Sometimes it gets up to 2 hours.
It's hard to keep up with her too.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure she clips along.
And I rarely miss a day.
Yeah.
Like this last week, I didn't walk on Saturday or Sunday. Saturday was that wedding, and Sunday the weather, and we went to the whatever. But I've walked every day since, even today, yesterday.
Bundles up.
Bundles up.
4 layers I wear.
4 layers. So that's a good idea. That's what I did. Well, like I said, do you have friends in the area?
Well, the neighbors, we get together, like we have a Christmas party next Wednesday over at the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the summer, we have a picnic near Champ Park. And we, just walking around, we all know each other pretty well. Neighbors go to church with us. The next condo, she is the administrator of Delmar Gardens North. And so we just all get together.
Plus, she has a friend from nursing school.
Oh, yeah, we still get
So
together
two of
with all the old supervisors
Oh, really?
and head nurses from they're all retired, most of them, but some are still working there.
Mm-hmm.
And just about a week ago, we had a big thing where about 27 of us met
Really?
at one person's house, and everybody brought food and booze and whatever. And we talk about what's going on and
Compare notes.
yeah, so we
Mhm.
still all get together.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
So you moved from here. Where was your previous address from where we're at right now?
Was on Huntington Drive in Wedgwood.
In Wedgwood. Okay.
That's where we had the 5-bedroom house.
And then you moved here.
To get out of the big house.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Actually, it wasn't that much bigger, but it's a condo, so
Right.
we don't have
Mm-hmm.
yard work or.
Which is always a
oh,
good
it's
thing.
so wonderful.
Oh, okay. Well, ask you a question. How has your life been different than you'd imagined it to be? When you were a kid, what did
I
you
would
think
have
you'd
never
be?
thought I'd have 10 kids, and I
Mhm.
don't recommend it at all.
You don't advise that.
Never.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
I always said if I was starting over, I'd have had 3 kids and I'd have had my tubes tied,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Catholic or not.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable anymore. It's just so
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
You don't need farmhands anymore.
No. And I don't know how we did it, but they all played sports. They all took music lessons, dancing lessons, and we went to everything.
They did.
I don't know how you
We
did
went
that.
to everything. I don't know how we did it.
Yeah, that's
I used
amazing.
to, and I used to put 5-course meals on the table every night. 5 o'clock, we ate, all of us.
That's even more
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah, that is.
Especially with today's, the way it
Oh,
works
yeah.
today.
We used to get sides of beef, and I just don't know how I did it, but I did.
Yeah. Do you have any regrets?
No.
None. Well, good for you. Let's see. How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, it's funny.
That's funny. Well, I think
Yeah.
I think you've pulled that off.
Yeah, when I got a sense of humor
Mm-hmm.
and somehow we get through everything.
Well, I guess that's about it.
Okay.
Unless you got something else you want to say.
No.
You want to say something to the kids? I mean, tell them
Well,
you.
you're rotten. You know I always liked Janet Laura best.
And Mary, butter your own toast.
Yeah. And like I always got advice, like I said, but of course I didn't follow that.
Yeah, don't have 10 kids. Right?
Oh, yeah. My mother used to say, now you have a nice family, she said when I had 2 boys and 2 girls. I hope you can quit.
Yeah.
And when I found out I was pregnant with the twins, I was going around the hospital and I was going to find somebody I could give money to call my mother and tell her I was pregnant. And then I was going to tell her, I said, well, since I'm pregnant again, I want to have another one right away because I don't want that one growing up alone. And here I had twins.
Guess that worked.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I believe we're done.
Yeah, we better quit. And John, you got nothing to say.